pleasure for me to welcome the participants in this event. May I take the opportunity to extend to all of you warm greetings on behalf of the Department of Legal Studies and the School of Law. And a special thanks is due to West Policino for making this event possible. And also Dustin Fusino, our colleague Dustin. I'm very happy for the positive response that we have received from constitutional scholars to the idea of focusing this workshop on constitutional rights and the internet. Bocconi University is actually putting a big effort on the project of extending its traditional areas of interest into new technologies, and the Department of Legal Studies is doing its own part in this project. As you probably know, the School of Law is going to launch the new LLM program, Law and Internet Technology, for which we have great expectations, and this workshop fits very well, I would say, with this project. So thank you so much for organizing this event, and I wish you a good afternoon. So thanks.
Thanks, Damiano. I'm not sure you can hear me, but in any case, I will speak just for 10 seconds to hand over to Giovanna Domenico. It's a great pleasure. She will tell more about it. She will tell how we started this project and which have been the aim behind the project and which will be the expected goal behind it. But first of all, I really like to present her in two words. She is a professor of constitutional law at Federico II in Naples, author of 3 books and numerous essays published in international journals. But also, she worked a lot for independent authorities, and she is a permanent contributor to Sovereignty Patrol, and so on and so forth. I would just say that she has played a very important role recently because she was a member of the board green President Chamber of Deputies Committee for the Internet Bill of Rights. And she's also director of the Media Center in Naples, a co-coordinator with me of international research group approved by International Association of Constitutional Law. Her presentation deals with fundamental rights in the age of terrorism, but I think she would like to say something more about the project, the research aims, and the background behind this day. Many thanks.
Thanks, Alessandra. I'm glad to be here. Thanks, Alessandra. I'm glad to be here with you, and I thank you all for coming, especially who has come from abroad. A year ago, when we were in Oslo, Orest and I had the promising idea to build up a group on the subject of the Constitution in the age of the Internet, with the 2 double perspectives. The first concerned the method, and we have chosen a method from bottom to up, because the team is changing day by day, and so also this practical could be suited to subject so changing. The second perspective concerns the merit of this subject. These topics could appear unrelated, but it's not true, because today, this afternoon, we'll listen from the architecture of the Internet to the specific right for example, right to privacy, national neutrality. In my opinion, there is a fil rouge from mountain to the sea, which is this fil rouge. Other internet is a subject, a paradise of self-regulation, or if can be ruled, ruled by an entity, private, public, or both, with rich interests. I don't want to add anything in merit because we have to wait for regulation. Just an idea that has been shared together. We want to collect all your paper, and so we are working for choosing a very good foreign editors. In this case, next week we send you an email with all the changes, and in this case, please respect the time to send us the paper. So I believe my evaluation. The question is the new challenges to fundamental rights in the age of fear. My speech will focus on this question. What are the minimum guarantees required to protect the fundamental digital rights in the time of fear? More specifically, to what extent may a state legally squeeze the liberties in order to prevent the risk of terrorism, which is the model of law of fear, is suited to the legal parameter posed by Article 52 of the Charter of Fundamental Rights. The model of law of fear should prevent that the danger of a future event is translated into actual and certain damage. The legislature must move on a slippery slope of risk, meant as both the verification and the calculation of the probability of its taking place. On the one hand, the present and skewed damage occurs to the fundamental freedom that are being compressed. On the other hand, a future and hypothetical advantage is expected to security. Chief Justice, national and supranational, from the Supreme Court of the United States, the leading case is Kate, to the European Court of Justice, Digital Rights Ireland, have been narrowing the political discretion of policymakers in accordance with the principle of precautionality and proportionality. The first principle guides the policymaker in its ex-ante prognosis of the threatened danger, something. The questions are the following: what are the chances of the risk actually happening, and which is the level of tolerable risk? The second principle requires the legislator to compare the costs borne by a certain freedom, which would be compressed, with the benefit of an increased safety. This difference is weighed between cost and benefit, suggested to set a proportionality not in the usual terms of equivalence, but in those of reasonable inequality. The advantage to protect the value, security, because of its uncertainty, must exceed the certain damage caused to the uncompressed right, wrote Alexi. Finally, a basic feature of the model law of fear should rest in the exceptional and temporary nature of its rules. On this subject, I refer to my presentation to the International Congress of IACL, already published in an Association of Constitutional Law. It's a website. Let's move now to the European answer to terrorism, and then have a look at the French and Italian vision. As to the European Union, the draft directive 2015 on combating terrorism replaces a Council framework decision. In brief, the new criminal figure infringes the acquis communautaire related to fundamental rights, Article 52 of the Charter, and the criminal law, Article 49 of the Charter. Firstly, the directive doesn't describe clearly and precisely what the offences consist in breach of the rule of law. Secondly, the scope of criminalization is extended into the Preparatory Act that are normally out of the criminal field. So conduct are created at early stage, not causing a serious and actual danger of terrorism. In this way, the precautionary principle is violated. Thirdly, the offences are focused on the criminal intention more than on the material conduct. This technique could result in the discriminating massing people and their ideologies. The absence of taxativity, offensiveness, materiality is the clear sign of a criminal policy unbalanced in favor of security and in damage of liberties. As to French and Italian laws, they present a common feature. They don't really consider the proportionality precautionary principle. France, although criticized the American Patriot Act, has de facto assumed it as model. The decree of 2015, number 125, has closed the website suspected of being related to terrorism. This measure is too harsh and extreme. It strangles the freedom of thought without ensuring an efficient prevention against terrorism. Moreover, we have had the law 2015, number 952, as envisaged measure favoring state espionage. The telco and the internet service providers must keep phone conversation and online communication and transmit those data to public authorities without another form of judgment. It's just sufficient an authorization by the Prime Minister on the advice of a new independent authority. Another law, 1501 of the same year, has strengthened the powers of administrative authorities without the previous authorization of a judge. The digital rights are shrinked in respect of a person even not connected to a terrorism offense. Let me remind the failed project to reform Article 56 of the French Constitution. This project now has failed. It's an attempt to fundamental right for several reasons that would be outlined in our forthcoming book. Thus, in France, the much blamed American system has been surpassed. Indeed, the NSA must in all cases be authorized by the judge before any wide recollection of user phone and online extrinsic data. By contrast, the French law doesn't pay any attention to the ban imposed by the European Court of Justice, and I refer to Digital Rights Ireland. The court holds that the means and the finality of the data recollection have to be well defined and suited to data's nature while ensuring that privacy be sacrificed only within the limits of strict necessity. The Italian legislation is very close to French one, but for a more in-depth examination, please refer to my observation that I gave before the second and fourth commission of the Chamber of Deputies during the procedure of conversion of this decree of law. To sum up, the fight against terrorism has opened the door to very significant breaches of the constitutional order. What are the remedies that could lead the emergency regimes back to legality? Let's see, as to the US system, the principle of separation of power can be derogated, but it should not lead to a reductio ad minimum of the powers. For reason of democratic control, these powers must be kept distinct, especially during times of emergency. Number two, the Eurocommittee, a common remedy both to US and European experience, should bring the legislator back to the respect of the principle of precautionary and proportionality, especially when fundamental rights and democracy itself are at risk. 3. Another remedy could consist of imposing to legislator to re-examine the temporary legislation. The prorogation of law could be made subject to progressively qualified and growing political majority, as proposed by Ackerman for the US system, but it could be extended to European systems. Going back to my starting point, The emergency legislature has been given a mandate to preserve the endangered legal system. The extraordinary law should bring back a balanced system, which has been temporarily altered and threatened by the state of danger. Thus, the derogative power has to be limited in time, avoiding the occurrence of irreversible breaches to the established power. Such breaches would alter the core of both the fundamental principle and the liberties of the constitutional order, preventing the system from resuming its original identity. To delve into this issue, I refer to my essays appearing in Federalism website. The emergency power, despite being exceptional, still remains a constituted power subject to the requirement of the rule of law, as we have listened this morning. This power does not write in a blank blackboard, because there is a constitutional framework to be respected. In the absence of any such framework, it would be a constituent power. It's evident, however, the intrinsic contradiction of applying original power to preserve a political institutional system. The emergency must be kept within the boundaries of the rule of law, otherwise the introduction of an exceptional law would hide a new legal political order, aiming to illegally replace the existing one. In conclusion, the fundamental rights and the guarantees of democracy must be defended, especially in times of crisis. Otherwise, the end of crisis would lead into an abnormal reality built upon the sacrifice of the democratic values which represent the ultimate ratio of the emergency legislation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Giovanna. I think it's interesting to reflect, elaborate on what you have said, but not now. And I will continue by maybe saying 2 words about the idea behind the project. Basically, as Damiano said before, it's quite clear for the new generation constitutional scholar that his field of investigation could not stop in the world of art, but should absolutely go beyond exploring words of things. And here there are at least 2 issues that are coming and emerging. The first one is clear, the most obvious one: protection of fundamental rights in the internet, and which is the degree of the fundamental rights in the internet, basically, which is the degree of the new constitutional protection when the field of the game is shifting from the out to the bits. This, I think, is the first part of the investigation. The second one is a little bit, I would say, more complicated, and for sure legal theorists can help us in terms of legal argumentation, which is the limits of judicial interpretation of code when they have to reshape a provision that was sold for the world of atoms in order to enforce the provision of the world of bits, which is the limit of judicial activism of the courts, which is the limit between judicial interpretation and judicial manipulation. If we see at the recent hot spring 2014 of the Luxembourg Code and the hot week autumn of the Luxembourg Code, I would say, even from the transatlantic point of view, as Federico will say, the autumn 2015, there are basically 3 judgments in which this exercise of manipulation is absolutely clear. It's absolutely self-evident. I'm referring to Digital Island, Google Spain, and Schrems. 2, 3 cases which basically the Court of Justice, without changing the status quo in terms of legislation, basically it's not legitimized to do it, is manipulating the relevant provision in order to anticipate the future, Which future? For example, the data protection regulation that was waited without entering force. And as Federico Mancini told us many years ago, the inertia of the legislative powers is proportional to the judicial activism of the courts. It is not the case that the court is manipulating, is inventing, while waiting for legislative powers to act. This is the first explanation that is encapsulated in the frame of government of the European Union. But there is also a second one. It's related, and this Federico will tell us very clearly, I think, later, on the reactive nature of this judicial activism approach. It's a reaction clearly to the NSA scandal, the massive surveillance, and the idea to enforce the European constitutional values against threats, which is the little slight spillover effect of this exercise. To enforce a new digital right, the digital privacy right that is not encapsulated in the legal provisions, but basically it's invented by the European Court of Justice for good reason, but with a spillover effect. At least two spillover effects, and then I will hand over to the next speaker. The first one is clearly an asymmetric balancing between digital privacy and the contrasting rights, especially freedom of expression. Access to information is not a coincidence that in Google Spain, European Court of Justice, by quoting obsessively Article 7 and 8 of the Charter, privacy and data protection, never quoted one time Article 11, that is the freedom of expression, while the Advocate General argued for a more balancing approach. So first spillover effect, asymmetric balancing. Second spillover effect, a kind of balkanization, fragmentation of internet rights in Europe. What do I mean by it? I mean that is emerging a new idea of European internet rights, especially a European internet that is built as a fortress that is very, very strong inside. I mean, if you consider which is the degree of protection of Article 7, Article 8, you will for sure consider a high level of protection, but with another spillover effect. Is missing the bridge, the link towards the external relations of Europe, especially with the United States. How is possible to reconcile this apparent paradox? I have no idea, and even if I would have an idea, it would not be the best place to speak, because clearly now we have at least 6 very prominent speakers coming from Copenhagen, Madrid, Israel, and Rome, that will for sure want to say something about it. So basically, I will stop here, giving the word and the floor to the next speaker, this is Federico Mancini. Please.
Just a few words to introduce Federico Fabbrini. Federico Fabbrini is Spanish Associate Professor, Professor of European International Law at the University of Copenhagen, Center of Excellence for International Court. He's published 2 monographies, Fundamental Rights in Europe, Challenges and Transformation in Comparative Perspective, Second, and Economic Governance in Europe, Comparative Paradoxes and the Constitutional Challenges. He presents a speech entitled Bridging the Transatlantic Divide. Take the floor.
much. Okay, so we've been trying to solve a technical problem. It doesn't seem to be working. I will be speaking then without power. So to begin with, let me thank you, Giovanna, for her kind introduction, and of course, Oreste, for the invitation to come to Bocconi University. It's a great pleasure to be back. Now, the title of my presentation, you cannot see it on the screen, and apologies for that. It's Bridging the Transatlantic Divide, the European Union, United States, and the protection of privacy across borders. Actually, this is the title of an article that has been published just a few days ago on ICON, the International Journal of Constitutional Law, and it is a piece that I have co-authored with my friend David Cole, with whom I also have the pleasure to chair the research group on constitutional responses to terrorism within the International Association of Constitutional Law. So we are, in a way, it's a great pleasure to be hosted by a sister research group, and one which deals with many topics which are close to the one we deal with within the field of counterterrorism. So the purpose of the article is to examine the protection of privacy in the field of government surveillance. And of course, the triggering factor in starting to think about the topic has been the Snowden regulation. Already Oreste previously has mentioned that. The starting point of our analysis has been the big debate that has taken place in Europe after the Snowden revelation, where essentially the European Union and the United States have been described as drifting apart, as representing two cultures of privacy protections which are fully inconsistent one with the other. And essentially, we were not convinced with the work. He's an American, I'm a European, but we both have strong interest in comparative analysis. So what we have endeavored to do is really to look more in depth at the relations between the European and the American legal systems. And the core argument that we make in the paper is that, in fact, the EU and the US are not so different on a specific issue, namely the protection of privacy for non-citizens abroad. So in fact, the two systems show a common problem, and in order to solve this common problem, we argue in favor, we make the case in favor of a transatlantic privacy compact that you represent the only way forward. So I don't have a slide, but I do have a structured presentation. I want to say something very brief about the European privacy protection rules first. Second, I'll say something about the US. Thirdly, I want to present clearly what the problem is. Fourthly, I'll try to explain how we can solve the problem, and then I will conclude. And I promise I'll do that in 8 minutes. So very quickly on EU privacy rules. Most of you are obviously familiar, and Giovanna has already introduced the topic in her first speech. In the European Union, privacy protections are highly important. They are entrenched in the Charter of Fundamental Rights, which has a constitutional status. We have legislation, comprehensive legislation on data protection, and of course, the European Court of Justice has been recently pushing very strongly in favor of data privacy and, let's say, privacy right in the digital age, in the case of Digital Rights Ireland, which has already been mentioned, it's perhaps the most striking evidence of that. However, having said that, EU data privacy law also has limitations. To begin with, EU data privacy law has a national security exception, which means that the member states are still allowed by EU law to adopt legislation in the field of surveillance for national security purpose. And the French case, which you have already mentioned, Giovanna, it's a striking evidence of that. Moreover, it's arguable that EU privacy law does not extend extraterritorially to the extent that, in particular, national security agencies of the EU member states are not subject to constraints under EU law when they operate overseas. Now, moving quickly to the United States, actually what we see under US law, it's a remarkably similar situation. Contrary to what many people think, US law has extensive privacy protection, but these privacy protections are domestic. The Fourth Amendment of the US Constitution has a very high standard of privacy protection, and there is legislation, even though it's not comprehensive like in Europe, but you have sectorial legislation on privacy protection, both at the federal and at the state level. And on top of that, of course, the Supreme Court of the United States has also been taking privacy seriously. Just an example is the Riley versus California judgment of 2013, where a unanimous Supreme Court ruled against police seizure of an iPhone without a judicial warrant. That's a strong example of privacy protection also in the American context. But just exactly as in the European Union, in the United States, this privacy protection have loopholes. And the key loopholes is that constitutional and statutory rules do not apply in the national security context. There is exceptions there. Plus, more importantly, these rules do not apply overseas, meaning that when the NSA is scooping on your email, there's no US constitutional protections that prevent that. So, moving here to the more comparative part of my presentation, what we really see is that both in the context of the European Union and in the context of the United States, there are domestic protections, but these protections do not operate vis-a-vis non-citizens abroad. Now, this is a problem in itself, but it's a problem that in the context of transatlantic relations is made even greater because of the cooperation that exists between European and American intelligence agencies. Now, if the NSA can spy on the Europeans, and if the Europeans could, if they had the capacity, spy on the Americans, but then they cooperate with each other, it's very easy to circumvent constitutional protection. Basically, the rules that apply domestically could be easily, turned around through interstate transatlantic cooperation. Now, how is it possible to solve that problem? In the paper that David Cole and I have written, we have made the case in favor of a transatlantic privacy compact, meaning a binding international agreement between the European Union and the United States, extending privacy rights reciprocally between the citizens of the two nations. Now, I must admit, when we started writing this in, I think it was, probably late 2013, many people thought we were fools. I am glad that the European Court of Justice has decided to Schrems judgment before I was invited to this workshop, because in fact, in October 2015, I think the European Court of Justice has given a ruling that largely endorses the argument that David Cole and I made. Meaning, as you know, in the Schrems case, the ECJ struck down the old safe harbor agreement, saying that it was not protective enough, and it called for a new agreement, which, in a way, largely goes down the road we already anticipated of having greater reciprocal privacy protection between the EU and the US. I know my time is running out, so I'll come quickly to the conclusion, and I just want to say this. Of course, there are many challenges in developing a stronger transatlantic framework for data protection. Oreste has already mentioned in his speech before also what might be many of the drawbacks. I just want to emphasize here that, of course, developing a stronger bilateral framework between the EU and the US on data privacy raises important challenges because it requires greater trust. It also requires a lot of confidence and, obviously, in the end, political will to do it. Yet, if you see what has happened over the last 4 months, in a relatively quick period of time, the EU authorities and the US government were able to negotiate a new pact, the so-called EU-US Privacy Shield, which does a much better job than Safe Harbor in protecting privacy. So I think that pact is the evidence that, in fact, greater transatlantic cooperation is a possibility to strengthen privacy. Now, of course, it's a big question. I suppose we'll come back later in the Q&A session afterwards whether EU Privacy Shield, EU-US Privacy Shield is enough. As you know, the Article 29 Working Parties Network of National Data Protection Authorities has suggested that, in fact, it is not enough. Potentials for further development, and if you think, of course, to the fact that the EU and the US are cooperating on so many other files, from TTIP, the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, to a broader umbrella agreement on police and criminal justice cooperation, not to mention, of course, NATO, we do have, in fact, a lot of opportunities for developing even further this transnational cooperation. Now, of course, as President Obama was saying in Hanover just 3 days ago, we do need greater Euro-American unity, because ultimately the challenges, terrorism, security, but also of prosperity and peace in our continent in the United States are tightly closed, and I think we should develop further that opportunity, building transatlantic bridges rather than tearing it down. Thank you very much.
Very many thanks, and it's been really intriguing and appealing to open immediately an answer, but I will not do. But I will just add something, and maybe Federico, it would be possible to reflect a little bit later on two main points. The first one is, I understand that the Schrems in a way is confirming your view on the one hand. On the other, it's also saying things a little bit different. Is this saying basically that there is not essential equivalence in the degree of protection of privacy? So basically, they think something that is a little bit rowing against your thesis, saying that basically there is not this equivalence. And then I'll maybe you could answer immediately. The second one is, what about the Obama? This is really, I have no idea, and I'm asking, which is the impact of the Obama decision to sign the law that recently basically extended to not European, not United States citizens the same protection that is afforded to the United States citizens in relation to privacy issues. Yeah, I look at it, sorry.
Okay, so no worries. Thanks so much, Lorenzo, for your quick and sharp question, as usual. So on the first point, you are hitting on an important issue, the question of the essential equivalence test, meaning whether U.S. law can provide adequate protection for the purposes of passing tests to Luxembourg. Now, I think the key point there is that the ECJ, in terms, was focusing on the conditions set in the Safe Harbor Agreement. And those conditions do not put any kind of limitation on the possibility for U.S. national security authorities to gain access to European data transferred to the United States. So certainly the protection afforded within that pact, the Safe Harbor, was not meeting European standards. But that doesn't mean that different kind of pacts that would extend on a reciprocal basis of protection would not fit. I think, in fact, Safe Harbor, EU Privacy Shield compared to Safe Harbor is doing already a much better job. The question is whether it is enough. And as I mentioned previously, the data protection authorities do think that it's not enough. And the issue there is clearly the fact that EU-US Privacy Shield is not really introducing the reciprocity clause, it's just raising the standard. But ultimately, I think Schrems, precisely for the point you highlighted, requires reciprocity. I mean, the only kind of agreement between the EU and the US which can really meet fully the requirements set by the 14 Schrems is an agreement that gives to European citizens exactly the same kind of rights that Americans have. That goes also to your second point. Now, the legislation that has been signed by Obama in January this year is not really about extending privacy rights to the Europeans. It's more about giving Europeans the right to repress. In fact, it's called the Judicial Redress Act, and it just essentially opens up U.S. federal courts to claims in tort brought by European citizens. That's, again, a step forward in the sense that previously there were restrictions in notwithstanding the ability to bring a case. Once more, is that enough, or should we aim for a higher standard? I think that's an interesting debate, and you will have noticed in my conclusions. I do hope that there will be further developments in terms of higher protection on both shores of the economy. Thanks.
So now it will be my pleasure to introduce two visiting professor here from Israel, Professor Shulamit Amo and Professor Lam. It is very, let me say just two words about it. It's very nice to have both of them here. It's a privilege for Bocconi University to try to enhance the cooperation with Haifa School, and especially to enhance with one of the most prominent professors in Haifa, Shulamit, that I had the privilege to share with her a course, the class of law and cinema at the beginning of April in Haifa. It was for me a really stimulating, I would say, incredible experience, and I really like to thank the public for this experience. And now I'm really happy to give them the floor speaking about protection of minors in Egypt. Starting the heart of our discussion, and I assume the principle of dignity will not be outside this kind of discussion. Thank you a lot.
Yeah. Thank you both for inviting us to present on this important and very interesting event. It's great to be here in Bocconi, in Milano, and we're happy. Yeah, this one. Okay, better now? Yes? No?
Okay, I think now.
What about now? Yeah, much better? Okay. So I'm happy to share with you the preliminary result findings that are evolving from research that I'm doing together with Liat Franco, who is my PhD student. And the research that Liat is doing in regard to her thesis is much wider. It has many aspects. Some of them belong to criminal laws, but we are going to discuss today several of the aspects that are highly relevant to constitutional law because they refer to human rights of children, and they really made us put forward advocating a new concept of ensuring children's rights in digital worlds, because there are now new dangers, new situations, that older concepts about human rights of children, for example, the concept that the Convention of the Right of the Child is based upon, seem to be insufficient to face the new situation that emerged. So just a general background to our research. We interviewed 66 children, aged, what were the age of the children? Yeah, the age 13, 14 years old, from 3 schools in Israel, in the north of Israel. The schools were in a different location, and the children come from different backgrounds. 2 schools are urban. The 3rd school is from a rural area. And we conducted a semi-constructed interview with all the children. You remember how much were boys and how much girls? 42 girls, the rest were boys. And we asked the children, we talked about the children, about their daily situation as participating in social networks, as conducting much of their social life, even educational life, in the internet. And we asked them a series of questions concerning their experience, the way they feel about being in the virtual space, and about their personal stories or experience, and about things they heard from things that happened to their friend or classmate. So here are the primary conclusions that are relevant to the topics that are being discussed here. As I said, this is part of a wider project, so we have many other conclusions. The first conclusion is that most of the children, almost all children, have wrong conclusion in regard to the legal norms that govern the virtual space and their experience in the virtual space. Children also feel that things that happen to them in the internet remain unaddressed. What I mean is that sometimes they feel there are situations that should be addressed by caretakers, by teachers, by parents, situations that are embarrassing, frightening, putting the children in distress, but the situation remains undistressed by adults. Another important thing that we found out is children are telling us about specific cases of we call it digital violence, of incidents in which children are being harmed, and they tell us about these specific cases of aggression, of electronic aggression, that the case were not legally addressed and actually were not addressed in any other matter. So to sum up the preliminary findings, we can say that we found out there is digital rights illiteracy among children, that children articulate sense of abandonment in the digital world. They feel lost. They feel sometimes completely lost, and as a result of the two first findings, children feel even despair. I know despair that is relevant to their digital life. They don't feel as if they are having any digital life. I know these are hard conclusions. It might be surprising to some few, but the app will go on and will demonstrate how we came into
this banner. Thank you, Shulami. I would like also to thank the organizer of the conference who host us here. And then, if I may, my part is taking the quotes of the children and actually bringing them forward. Some of the quotes are hard, some of them are harsh to listen or to fathom because they're based on true stories. Now, don't be confused. Cyberbullying is everywhere. Electronic aggression is in every country. You have the Carolina Picchu case, which in Novara, Italy, it was a very famous case. In one day, the 14-year-old girl received 2,600 messages in WhatsApp, one day. During that day, she committed suicide that day. And it's a famous story. If some of you know what happened, because her parents actually sued Facebook, if some of you know the verdict, what happened, I will be happy to, because I can't find it. So, as Shulamit said, basically, children are online 4 hours a day over social network, okay? This notion is worldwide. It's not only Israel, it's also Italy, US. So they're online 4 hours a day. In this domain, in this realm, they feel unsafe and abandoned because law does not exist in their realm, okay? It doesn't matter if we think it exists as adults, because in Israel there is a law that pertains specifically to, let's say, posting nude pictures or posting, actually, the one who posted it. It doesn't matter if the girl, because this is very common, a girl takes a picture of herself of a video that is naked, she gives it in confidence to her boyfriend, and then somebody takes his phone or the boyfriend after they break up and distribute it. Now the law in Israel actually, and I think in many other countries, goes against the distributors. That's the law. But in reality, de facto, none of the cases we encountered, and I counted them, there were 96 harsh incidents of cyberbullying. And when I say harsh, you go all the way. It could be naked, it could be not naked, it could be go kill yourself, suicide. Just yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, we heard of a case in the United States that somebody actually encouraged someone to commit suicide, a teenager, and he did commit suicide, and he was filed with an accusation of murder. She was a girl for an accusation of murder. So this issue is very transnational, and I believe that the basic of it is very constitutional. Because we're talking about rights of children, so it has constitutional element. Now I'll go into some of the quotes. 14-year-old girl said, "Whoever is in it cannot get out." Think how scary that is. Another 13-year-old boy who chooses to be digitally disconnected. Actually, out of the 66 we interviewed, he was the only one who did not possess a cell phone. He said, I'm afraid it's going to taunt me. 14-year-old girl, I'm most afraid of WhatsApp because suddenly it's a group and everybody has it. There's a feeling that at any moment someone can hurt you. It's like at any moment someone can write something about you, at any moment someone can spread a rumor on you. Now for us, it's very alarming, these feelings, because these are children and they will grow up and become adults. What kind of adults that live in a world that does not have a law? In their perception, I'm sure it will have a ramification. There are no laws on WhatsApp. This is a girl that says, we asked her, one of the questions was, is there any law pertaining to your behavior online? She said, no laws on WhatsApp, no laws on Instagram, no laws on nothing, not a single one. Now this, I have to say, this is in one of the best schools in Israel. It's a private school. It's considered to be a very elite-oriented school, and the children are illiterate about our law. Another one, here in this country, no law exists, so it's problematic. There's no law about it, so yes, they can share a picture without permission. A participant is telling about a 13-year-old classmate who had sent a video of herself in nude. Now this story, I will have to pause and tell you, a video of 1.5 minutes. was spread in all 3 schools, and as Shulamit mentioned, they are in different cities. This particular story also got all the way to France. How do I know that? Because someone who I interviewed told me, oh, my cousin in France actually asked me if I know this girl. It's a video, one minute and a half in nude. I would not elaborate what is it in nude, but it's a hard, very, very hard incident. She took the video of herself that she was talking, sent it to her boyfriend, and then, of course, it was released. The video was spread around 1,000. She did not go to the police, the girl, because she is to blame. She had sent the picture at her own will. If she would have gone to the police, then she's twice a whore. Once for sending a naked picture, and second for reporting to the police that it was distributed. So you see, the numbers are only 2% of teenagers report on harsh cyberbullying events. 2%. And in our interviews, it was the same. Out of the 96 cases that we interviewed, one went to the police, and the teacher was involved because somebody took a picture of her, dropped the picture, and then she reported to the police. But all in all, none of the events went to the, no, law was not relevant. Okay. I know the law regarding privacy, but hurting your privacy, how? By the way, connecting to your privacy lecture that you gave, it should be international standard. That's what it should be. And of course, also with children. So he's saying how? By sending something private that you had sent to me, they don't even realize that it's not taking the picture itself that it's private. It's the distribution. Children don't get it, teachers don't get it, and parents don't get it. They blame the girl who took the picture. They don't blame the distributors who are criminally liable. If you send it to me by your own choice, I'm not to blame if I later distribute it. Children experience lack of response. This is very, very important. For them, they are alone. I don't know. Okay, I will skip it, but these are very good quotes. There was one case of over-responsiveness, but it was only one. Offensive that were not legally addressed. I prefer not to go to the police involved. I would have to look at the picture again and deal with it again. I did not want to talk about it again. I did not want to re-experience what happened to me. It would be like being raped again. It's important because I think we believe that the law, as it is today, is not tailored to deal with this situation at all. Because nobody will actually file criminal charges because in reality it doesn't happen. That's a song, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to our last We believe that there is a link between how children perceive law in the digital space and how they perceive law in the physical space. They are very connected. There's a link between how children perceive law in the digital, we said that. Children experience and witness offensive incident that in their perception law is not being enforced, even though it should. Children experience that there is no adequate response from their surroundings, teachers, parents, police, you name it. And the implications, of course, are very grand. Bottom line, we believe that the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child should consider redrafting or tailoring specific rights to children in this age. And in the local level, every country has to libel law, privacy on sexual harassment law should be critically examined to see if they do fit the situation.
Let me just a question. I think very astonished that children has not awareness.
I've been very surprised from your vision, and I have learned that children as not conscious to have rights. They consider themselves object but not subject of digital rights. In your opinion, if I understand, in your opinion, which is the real cause of this situation? Literature or rather a political question? No information, so a lack of political information and so a question of political accountability. But I don't want to anticipate your answer.
Thank you. It is a very good question, and it touches exactly the most important question of what should be done. Well, in my opinion, I give the floor to Jackson, but in my opinion, it is indeed a political question. It is a question of responsibility, of accountability, of who are we to blame or to tag as responsible to the situation of children. And in my opinion, it is indeed authorities that must take responsibility and think about quite urgent steps in order to rectify the situation. But I think that we have to also like to add.
I think it's a political issue, but also a social issue, because adults believe that this is children's world. They say privacy, but I believe that no, these cases do not deserve privacy. You are a parent. For my information, but I have a lecture of 1 hour and a half about it. As a parent, you need to take your child until the age of 12 and look at the WhatsApp. You have to do that. This age, 13, 14, you cannot. They receive 2,000, 3,000 WhatsApp a day, you cannot. But you need to educate children. I think it's a social issue where people say, oh, it's a children's world. It's a children's playground. A lot of times, police officers say, what do you want me to go? To go to the playground? This is the playground. This is not a place for me, police officers. So it's a social issue where they believe that this is a child thing, but they don't understand this is a very serious issue. It's not only a child thing.
Just one issue before handing over to the next speaker that Giovanna will present. And I mentioned before Giuseppe Federico Mancini and the relationship between legislative inertia and judicial activism. Sometimes it's not judicial activism is not just based on the legislative inertia, but also based on fear, on judicial fear. What do I mean? I just mean that if you look at the case law of Strasbourg Court, you will see that many issues that before in the world of atoms were dealt in a certain way, and speaking precisely about freedom of expression and privacy, when you shift to the world of bits, when you shift to new technology, then you see something different. Basically, you see the judge are in a way scared about the implication of the new technology. And what did happen? How this is concretizing? Basically, considering in conformity to the Convention of Human Rights, some limitations, stated limitation, freedom of expression, that in the words of Atom were never been considered in conformity. And in general, why I'm saying this now, just because one of the biggest fears of Strasbourg judges is exactly protection of minors in internet. Basically, they are much more scared about the impact of the internet against, I would say, dignity of minors than before the digital age. And basically, by balancing freedom of expression with contrasting rights, they consider prevailing the interest to protect contrasting rights and basically to consider not anymore so crucial freedom of expression like it was, I would say, in the world of atoms. I mean, it's just enough to remind, for example, Handyside. I would say the grand array of the Strasbourg Court in the world of atoms. It was a watchdog freedom of expression, Article 10. Now I would not say that it's changing role, but for sure in a way it's adjusting in relation to the new digital fields. Please.
Now, Fulvia Abbondante. I have to introduce Fulvia Abbondante. Fulvia Abbondante took a PhD. Now she's a researcher in the Department law at my university, the University of Naples, Federico II. She teaches information and communication law at the same department. She take part in a lot of research concerning privacy, communication, and the good experience in the UK system. Top presentation deals with the European regulation of net neutrality. Now, check the floor to you.
I am grateful to Professor Giovanna Benito and Professor Mr. Policino for giving me the opportunity to participate to this workshop and this very interesting debate. I am grateful to Dr. Marana Bisati, who analyzed this generating issue, and Dr. Fabio Della Persana, who is contributing to exploring the net neutrality in USA. The net neutrality is the principle according on internet by internet access operator. A premise is necessary. According to many scholars, net neutrality is a principle of competition. In my opinion, this view is not completely correct, because it does take into account that the web is a tool for which the end users exercise fundamental rights and freedoms. As Professor Benito pointed out in present issue, net neutrality as fundamental rights of the in Internet Journal Constitutional.it, the first, 2016, in fact, in Internet access provider can choose which content or service through prior rights, the ongoing produce negative effects of the end user. As matter of fact, through the prioritization of content, the Internet access provider should the idea that it is the best among others, because of the speed and the cost, instead of the consumer. Net neutrality protecting the possibility of access to all content without distinction by end users is no longer an autonomous instrument to ensure free competition between service and content providers, but a means of ensuring a much more significant value, such as the freedom of information. In this sense, seems to more regularly in the intervention done by Federal Communication Commission in the order which dates back to February 26, 2015. It established that principle of no blocking, no blocking, no prioritization with the extraordinary clarity. In conclusion, strong but flexible if necessary, sustainable rules were introduced in USA. In Europe, in November 2015, the regulation on digital single market was approved. The regulatory framework that emerges is quite confusing and difficult to apply. First, there is no precise definition of neutrality unless we consider the generic references to requirements for the network operators. Secondly, the exceptions to the rule of net neutrality are too broad, and there are a number of loopholes that give too huge a margin to operators to derogate from the principle of net neutrality. The first derogation of net neutrality principles is in the Article 3.2. The regulation allows network operators to make agreements to give a fast bandwidth to suppliers of specialized services. The specialized services are, according to the regulation, all other non-internet access services. That is important because it allows applications that would not be able to function on open internet because they need special equipment that open internet cannot provide. And the OP needs more bandwidth than email to merge. However, the definition in European regulation is too broad. Because of this, the ISPs can provide fixed line to content by calling to specialized services. To be clear, the new or greater startup that cannot pay an extra fee to have a fast lane outside the market. On the other hand, the consumer has no possibility to access this website if they cannot afford to pay extra fees. The second rule, the ISPs can make distinction between different kinds of traffic and treat them different to optimize overall transmission quality at 10 times, not just during times of congestion. The differentiation must be based on technical requirements of the application in question. Thus, ISPs could treat different types of application differently if they have different technical requirements. This behavior causes a distortion of competition, and consequently, a limitation of freedom of information to the end users. Third exception, the zero rating was not specifically bound, contradicting the laws of some member states, Germany, for example. Zero rating agreements enable customers to download and upload online content without incurring data user charge, or having to use an account against data users limit. Zero rating agreements could violate national traffic principles by discriminating in favor of some content or other content. This practice could harm competition in markets related to internet access and online content, or interfere with consumers' access to online information, i.e. diversity of expression. Finally, zero rating could limit economic initiative or third operators if the agreement does not contain fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory information for participation. Lastly, with regard to the hypothesis of congestion, Article 10, paragraph 5 provides that the operators can also act in order to prevent imminent congestion. Imminent will have a clear definition, thus giving a wide choice on if and when to intervene to the internet access provider. The powers that it will give to national regulatory authorities in case of breach of the penal rule are also unclear. Precisely because of the darkness, Article 5 also provides that the IACL, through public consultation, will identify guidelines that national regulatory authorities can apply to ensure the homogeneous enforcement of the regulation. The problem is that the guidelines are soft law and not binding for actors of internet. Finally, the regulation limits the member states to provide for sanction in case of infringement of Article 3, 4, and 5, causing a patch application of the rules. As a matter of fact, that is an law that ISPs give a more affordable interpretation of the regulation guidelines in those countries where sanctions are more soft, while they respect the discipline where sanctions are more consistent. As I tried to show, regulation fails its goal of giving clear rules for operators, service providers, and European citizens, and of protecting rights and liberties on internet. Thank you very much for your attention.
In my opinion, India has risen a lot of issues, and of course it's impossible to close now to this stage in this afternoon. In my opinion, the most important is in which direction the regulation on net neutrality should go, in the direction to protect economic rights or in the direction to consider economic rights just as a means to obtain another value of freedom of speech. Because it is an important choice that must be made, and it is a choice that the recent European regulation in digital single market has closed but not has closed. For example, zero rating is a question that also at the Congress of Europe was the most debated, and it has not received one answer. Now I think we have to present German tour. You want?
Now, please, the next speaker, German Turel, lecturer at the University European in Madrid, and advisor, I don't think, and advisor in the Constitutional Affair Spanish Parliament. His research field is about fundamental rights in the internet, and I think that today we will present some selected issues related to internet and digital protection in a more, I would say, not generic, but systemic terms. Please.
Thank you very much. I don't know if you heard me if I speak like that without a microphone? Yeah, I feel better, yes, I got more for the
Yes.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank Oreste and Giovanna for leading this group, this group, and for inviting me to come here. I think it was a great idea because we really need a group of researchers like this one in order to put together our idea in an international level. Because as we have seen today, we have been talking during our research, this is an international topic. Constitution in the age of the internet is a global topic that we cannot just study in a national level. I'm very glad for being here, and I want just to stimulate the debate about fundamental rights in the digital society, in particular, freedom of speech. Freedom of speech and its protection, both against public and private powers. Because I really think that it's one of the new topics that we have to go in our research. Let me start saying that I think that we are living a revolution. I really think that we are living a revolution. Productive, economic, political, social, cultural structure have changed. We can say, it could be sound strong, but we can say that we are living a revolution like the ones in the Industrial Revolution or more, like the Neolithic Revolution. Why? Because we have created a new city. Now we have a new city, a new environment. We have a new way of living. The digital revolution is based on information and communication. And we should know that on one hand, has broken the categories of time and space in our physical world. But we have also created the new space, the environment, the digital one. But I have to say, when we talk about digital society, I think that we cannot talk just about the online society. For example, now we are in a seminar, in a physics seminar, but we are streaming. All of you have a computer, a mobile phone here. That's also digital society. That's also technology. So, could we live now in our physical world without technology, without internet? I feel naked if I don't have my telephone with me. So, we cannot divide anymore saying we have an online world and physical world. Because our physical world, our way of relation, our way of communication has already changed. Has already changed in a huge way. For that reason, I say that we are living a real revolution. And if we are living a real revolution, if society develops, law has to do. Law has to develop in the society. What is not possible if what you said that children doesn't know that there is no law. We need a law. We need something that should be used. So we need a law in the internet. We need fundamental rights in the internet, but also we need to rethink fundamental rights out of internet. Because the way that we define, that we understand the fundamental rights, the fundamental values that justify the protection of a fundamental right has already changed also. We have adopted different views that we used to be. Freedom of speech is the same as it used to be when it was recognized in the first constitution. I think not. For that reason, my first point, the first point is that it's an invitation to reflect on the change in society and the change in the law that we really need to. One of the points in this revolution is that we have a new communication model. I said the revolution is based on communication. And we have a new way of communication. The way of communication, our communication model now is not like it used to be before. Now, the communication model is multidirectional. The information flow, and everyone can spread and receive information, opinion. The communication is horizontal, where every citizen can participate without any access barrier. The communication is decentralized, where there is not a control center. Now the communication is interactive. It's no longer a club where there is an owner of a media who controls the information in just one way. Now we have a more democratic model of communication. We can participate to create public opinion. So we need to reread the freedom of speech, the freedom of expression, the freedom of information. As Balkan State, internet and digital technologies help us look at freedom of speech from a different perspective. That is not because digital technologies change what freedom of speech is. Rather, it is because digital technologies change the social condition in which people speak, and by changing the social condition of speech, they bring to light features of freedom of speech that have always existed in the background, but now become foregrounded. From my point of view, in the digital era, freedom of speech and freedom of information has to develop to a real use communications, a right of communication in which the whole communication process is protected. We have to recognize freedom of speech for the active position, but also from the passive one. The right of receiving information and having access to information. We have to protect the communication process, because in our society, communication is a fundamental value for the personal development. Who we think to develop ourselves without communicating? We really need to communicate. So what we are protecting is the possibility that I have as a person to communicate. Communicate? Okay. In this context, we need to study what is the new definition of freedom of expression, the new limits, but also the way of protection. Censorship is the same as it used to be. Blocking website, filtering, private censorship. We need to protect, for example, not just to send information, but also this filter that doesn't allow to receive information, to block information. I'm a citizen, I want to know what is on the internet. And if we have a filter, I cannot access to this information. We should, just to finish, also to within other fundamental rights, privacy. Is it privacy the same? The definition of privacy as it used to be? Now the privacy is the same when we have 500 people as friends in Facebook, that when we have just an album with some photos in my house. Our definition, our idea of privacy, of something familiar, is the same. Political rights, we are going to talk about that after, so I'm not going to say anything more. Just a conclusion. Our world, our society is far away from the previous ways of living. So we need to define fundamental rights both online and offline. In our global society, we should face the debate in an international forum like this one, but also in political institutions. Do we need an internet bill of rights, as Professor Domenico proposed? I think yes. We already have international convention on human rights, but maybe we need an internet bill of rights to stress some particularities of the definition and protection of these rights in the internet. We need to approach our vision. I know that it's difficult, but we need to make this effort as an academic, a political, and institutional effort. And one very important thing, we need to change the vision about what the fundamental rights are as fundamental rights, as defense rights. In which sense? In the digital society, we can see the power of private powers. Who is building this city? Are you building this city? We are just users. The state has some power, but not much power. Who is building the architecture of this world are private powers, global private powers, Google, Facebook. They are the leader in the cybernet. So, we need also to affirm our fundamental right in front of this. We can make it, it's not as a dream. If Chinese government deals with Google, saying, okay, you have to send some information, we can make the same, but to the contrary, we can ask Google to respect net neutrality. In order to build a new city with people who develop with freedom and equality. Thank you very much.
Many thanks also for the attempt to stay in the time frame. Not completely successful, but I really appreciate that. It's important because there are still many speakers, and I just must apologize because I mentioned Copenhagen, I mentioned Madrid, I mentioned Haifa, but I didn't mention first of all Naples and also Valencia. And please apologize to speakers for this lack of attention. Having said this, before hand over to Giovanna, I think want to say something before introducing the next speaker. I would say just one thing in relation to your talk. When you mentioned the filter, when you mentioned the idea of filtering, so you mentioned that it's quite important because it's basically the choice between regulation and technology. And this was at the heart of a Reno judgment in 1997 in the Supreme Court. It was exactly not proportionate enough, they would say, to go for a regulation when there was an alternative text, like the filter would have impacted less on the holy rights First Amendment.
When I heard your relation, I've been provocated by your affirmation. You said that with internet we have had a revolution in communication. I agree with this, of course. But in my opinion, the real revolution that we are waiting for is a revolution in a different way of distribution of wealth. In other words, if equality is the cornerstone of that should be the new cornerstone of the regulation in internet. And so if equality is a might of reality in internet, that's a question that I pose. Now I introduce Professor Rosario Sella, Professor of Constitutional Law in the University of Valencia. She's a member of the Institute of Human Rights in the same university and member of the Research and Development Group, Global Security and Fundamental Rights, the Protection Against Threats and the Guarantees of Liberties, framed by the Spanish Minister of Economy and Competitiveness. She takes part of the fourth group, Privacy, with Miriam Pijano and Maria Repishan. Here, her paper is entitled Privacy and the Counter-Terrorism Fight in the Digital Area.
Thank you very much. Thank you both. Congratulations for this meeting and for the project. I would like to very briefly to introduce and to talk on behalf of Miriam Villano and Maria Orefice. Miriam Villano is going to present a work on Internet and rights to privacy, where she's going to talk about new European rules, especially after adoption of the new General Regulation on Data Protection and other norms in EU. She's in her paper, she's going to talk about new rules on data protection, especially about access to data, the right of rectification, right to be not to forgotten, etc., etc. Maria Orefice, the second participant in this group, is going to make a paper on privacy and transparency in the digital era. For her, digital big data, can be used as a benefit of citizens. It could help to accelerate the economy, to make government more efficient, but on this task, the public authorities must observe the principles of democracy, transparency, efficiency, and positive increase. So it's a question of balance between privacy and data public utility. And thirdly, my paper that is entitled Privacy and Counter-Terrorism Fight in the Digital Era, also deals with the balancing, in this case, the balancing between security and fundamental rights, as you both and Federico talked previously. We know that jihadism attacks represent an evident threat for everybody, and the state's involvement becomes necessary in order to prevent further attacks in general. We know that these terrorists use internet, they use data in order to obtain response, in order to make groups, to spread their ideas, their ideology, and especially it's very important for the internet when talking about the foreigner terrorist fighters. So for all the reasons, the state supervision on this digital communication and the state monitoring of data could be really useful in the framework of the counterterrorism fight. The issue arises when state policies become excessive or unjustified, when the citizens feel that it's too much for us. My paper will propose to underline the observance of the common standards of protection for privacy rights, for data protection, because we have common standards in our recently European Constitution, in the EU law, especially with the new norms on data protection, and we have the European Convention on Human Rights and different rulings of the European Court of Human Rights. So taking into account all these things, we have to put in the core of this fight principles of respect for liberties, the respect of the principle of consent, and to study when it exists a legitimate aim to monitor sites, people, and of course proportionality. And finally, to finalize with my presentation, I think that it's really important to respect rules established in relation with information sharing. When we share data, and there are many agreements adopted recently on this framework, it's important to remain that that data protection rules and the privacy rights. In my paper, I talk about the new directive on data flow in the areas of judicial and police cooperation, for example, or what happened with the passenger name record register, recently adopted, or renewed at least, what happened with the privacy shield agreement that take place, you previously mentioned in your wonderful presentation, Federico, and what happened with the European Union and US terrorism finance tracking program. Also, all of them talk about information sharing and the flow of data, and in all of them, privacy is involved. So, we think that we could discuss about what are better solutions for this balance between privacy and security protection, and of course, this is a challenge. Thank you.
Thanks. Now I have to introduce Dr. Marco Bassini. Marco Bassini, who is now I read. Marco Bassini is a PhD candidate in constitutional law at the University of Verona and Boston University. He has a lot of interest cover from constitutional, EU law and media law. He's a member of section political rights and the internet with Professor Villone and Dottoressa Maria Francesca Di Tullio, and now I'm silent and take the floor.
Thank you very much. I'm grateful to Professor Domenico and Professor Cudicino for organizing this event. I'm sorry about joining the conference late. And also to thank my thanks to Professor Massimo Villone and Francesca Di Tullio who joined the group together with me. And so this speech is a very starting point of the inter-analysis of the state. I want to make a preliminary remark. In my view, the internet is often referred to in a rhetorical way. We are talking about fundamental rights, when we are talking about the different issues from the legal point of view. And so there are a lot of opportunities brought by the internet, but at the same time we have a lot of risks and a lot of challenges that the internet had to bring about. And so also when it comes to analyzing political rights and the impact of the internet on political rights, we should take into account very carefully which are the opportunities taken by the internet. I think that we can distinguish two different means by which the internet may affect political rights. On one hand, of course, the internet is making available a lot of information, a huge amount of information, and this way it's facilitating the exercise of political rights. And political rights are, let's say, to be exercised in a more responsible way, as we really enjoy a lot of information, and information, is a condition for the responsible exercise of political rights. But let me also point out that the huge amount of information circulating on the internet is often inaccurate, false, and so we also have to consider the risks which are connected with the circulation of information. On the other hand, the internet is assumed to foster the direct participation of voters and citizens to politics. And here there is a very important idea that the internet has a very huge amount of democratic virtues. I think that these democratic virtues have improved. And here we can analyze a couple of questions that in my view may be
very relevant to understand why these democratic virtues are improved. The first set of problems can be explored looking at the way political institutions and parties are affected in their relations with voters by the handling. Traditional political parties have not fully taken advantage of the internet, in my view. They are trying to use the internet in order to get closer to voters in an age of crisis for them. But maybe they are the rising, emerging political parties, the actors that mainly have taken the opportunities as well, especially anti-party parties or protest movements are enjoying a lot of the opportunities brought by the internet. But together with the use of the internet for standard political ideas, there is also the idea that the internet is going to replace all the participation, or the mechanism of participation by individuals in order to exercise their political right. And the idea which is behind many political movements and parties is that the internet, in a way, is supposed to replace the democratic participation which is normally carried out by political parties. So the intermediation of political parties is removed, and then individuals and citizens may directly participate. So this is the digital democracy, the electronic democracy work. The political parties will revalue themselves. I think that this assumption should be revisited. Also, like a lot of critical issues that emerge in the today's scenario. First of all, we should consider the role of the right to access to the internet. As we know, the condition for anybody to exercise their right is the, of course, make the internet available for everybody. If the internet is not available, then part of the citizens could be deprived of the material possibility to exercise these rights. And then the question of internet access is very crucial. And then we should think about how to resolve this issue, because to the extent citizens have no opportunity to get the participation, then the idea of representation is affected by the not fully guaranteed right to access. On the other hand, a very close topic to the right to access to the internet is the topic of the digital divide, which is not properly corresponding to the problem of granting access to the internet to citizens. There's a problem of making the responsive use of the internet and making use of the internet, for instance, handling the information circulating on the web in a very good way. The connection between the access to the internet and the opportunities in terms of exercise of political rights are, in my view, evident in the case of Estonia. Estonia is one of the states which set the right to access to the internet at the legislative level, not at the constitutional level. But this permitted Estonia to introduce, to implement the exercise of electronic voting. So we see the connection between access as condition to exercise rights for voters and the consequence, in this case, of course, good consequence, good opportunities taken by the internet. But in order to make sure that all participants, all citizens may take part in the political process, maybe we need to think about how to guarantee access. It is very difficult to guarantee access, but this is not, of course, the point I'm going to approach now. I think that there is a second point concerning how political parties are taking advantage from the rise of the internet. Let's think about election from the reality. Are we sure that when political parties are sharing part of the political process with citizens, they are actually making a real representation of the will of voters and the electors? Is the deliberation of a decision taken on the basis of the vote given by users on the internet an actual representation of the will of the voters of that political party? I think that if we look at some samples, we can realize how maybe some parts of the voters are able to express their vote, and therefore maybe those political decisions which some political parties may label apparently as democratic may not prove fully democratic. So there is a problem of internal democracy when it comes to the way political parties behave in response to stakeholders. And there is also a problem of external democracy. If we look at certain regimes, if we look at censorship strategy, we realize that the internet can be influenced by such strategy, and therefore the problem of governance emerges a crucial issue as well. The internet is somewhat frequently referred to as a democratic plan, and some political parties or movements assume that the internet is a very good platform to exercise political rights by reason of the fact that it is free. But we know that the internet is not free at all, and that the power of government to influence the internet and what happens on the internet is very significant. And the second issue, which in our view is very relevant, and this is not my remarks, but the remarks that emerged from our joint effort in preparative speech, is concerning the role of other actors in the balance between the exercise of political rights and other rights. I'm referring to the role of some private actors, especially referring to social networks or other private platforms. We had the chance to examine the case of Polyfoods. Polyfoods is a platform which is storing and making public all the tweets removed by politicians from their Twitter account. They can try to remove, of course, by a lot of reasons, maybe because they were, of course, embarrassing or because they changed political position. There are a very good number of reasons that may lead politicians to do so. And then we have a problem. To allow people and politicians to hide this content or to leave this content free to circulate on the internet and make people in condition to access the same for reason of accountability and transparency. So on one hand, we have the right to be forgotten, right to privacy, right of the politicians to claim the removal and deletion of this content. On the other hand, if we look at the other side of the question, then it emerges that maybe in order to have a full exercise and the real exercise of their political rights, individuals may claim for public circulation of this content, therefore, to get full knowledge of this content, even though the politicians removed. There is a decision of 2005 of the Criminal Court of New York, which is very significant in this respect because it allows FBI to access this information at all. So, in order to try to understand which are the problems connected with the emergence of these platforms, we should question whether we are in front of a new public square, let's say, whether as a consequence of that, it should be put in the hands of these private operators to balance between the different interests at stake, and therefore the influence of the political nature of the actors involved is very relevant. So, in order to conclude, the first point was talking about the role of political parties and the consequence in terms of the participation by individuals and the claim, which is very recurrent, according to which individuals may directly participate in the digital democracy political process. I think that we should not consider internet as a channel which is alternative to the normal participatory democratic process and mechanism. Internet is an opportunity to foster political participation. Internet is not in way political rights are today exercised. Maybe this should be an interesting point to consider, because otherwise we shall build a different stage, different platform where all the rights are exercised by the internet, where let's say the platform becomes the territory where these rights are exercised, and we don't have the traditional political character. With respect to the second point we mentioned in our abstract, and that will be explored later, let me say that when private actors are involved in the balance between fundamental rights, there are some critical points to consider. In my view, when it comes to private operators, we should always consider that these operators are playing their role and are acting in order to make business, not in order to protect fundamental rights. This was the reason why they were born, and therefore we should carefully handle the issue. We should consider that in most of the cases, private operators are acting when exercising the freedom to conduct business, and therefore the problem of balancing should rest in the hands of lawmakers and courts, but not specifically only in the hands of private actors. Thank you.
Because now we are really at the heart of the tension between internet and constitutional law, thinking about what the most constitutional, I would say, or even political right, like right of exercise in order to foster sovereignty and representation in a national debate. And I think that it's time at least to try to open for debate, because we have still time. I know that one of the two composite keynote speakers has to catch a flight at 7, but this means that he has to leave at 6. This means that we have, in an optimistic way, 40 minutes for discussion. Maybe it should be too much, but please let me also add that here I'm very grateful, first of all, to the last speaker, Marco Bassini, that played a precious role in order to organize all this workshop. Secondly, I'm very grateful to my students that are here, that are all finishing or starting to write their thesis exactly on this area. So very, very nice to see you here. And also, we have also other members of our group, like Leonardo Verdominici, that is still silent, but I hope now we break the ice by saying something and opening the debate. Many thanks. So very content.
Yes, I'm surprised and I'm very happy to be here. Thanks indeed for the invitation. I heard so many interesting talks by the authors, and I would say that the main point I would like to do is a really general one, and in this I look forward to the conclusions of the workshop on the role of public law and the role of private law in this, because in my view, the real challenge we face when we hear all these particular thoughts on very specific topics with such a specific attention to specific topics, in my view, the real challenge is which are the right instruments law can put in place to deal with such things, and which is the role of public law, which is the role of private law, which is the role of public authorities, and which is the role of private entities and private parties in dealing with all these problems I'm talking about. Protection of fundamental rights, I'm talking about governance, I'm talking about censorship, I'm talking about political rights, with these very interesting reflections by John Stoker. And so I look forward for the conclusions to understand, even from the methodological point of view in our research, which is the role of public law, of public law and private law, and public entities and private entities in this respect.
Very interesting. Thanks a lot. And I think that with this kind of question, we can open the debate. Which are the right tools, and especially which kind of cooperation you can expect from scholars coming from different areas or different backgrounds. It's clearly a kind of call for multidisciplinary effort, this for sure. But from the methodological point of view, which are the right tools? Any of our students, any of our students want to take the floor?
I'd like just
Please.
to present some scholars who came from Naples. Two of them belong to different groups. One is Professor Jurek, group of privacy. The other one, belongs to the group of political rights. Of course, you are not obliged to change to intervene, but if you want, of course, you are welcome. Consideration that you can.
Yeah, I just Leonardo because I know it should be. Please.
So you
The role of private
I
entities.
mean, not just a quick cut, but here you can have your spontaneous reflection.
Introduce yourself.
I'm Deborah. I'm writing my thesis about the safe harbor agreement and the impact on businesses. And I was something interesting is the fact that private entities have a huge role in the negotiation about, especially about the privacy and data protection. And I was really interested in the fact that entities such as Google, Microsoft, and other companies like that are fundamental in the negotiation. And we are not taking them into account, but they have a huge role there. And I was wondering, what is, according to you, the degree of implication of those companies in the debate that, especially regarding your report? Yeah. So what is the role, what are the roles of those companies in the debate, and do you think that they can change the future, or do you think that is more something in the hands of public entities?
Beautiful question.
Now I expect a beautiful answer.
We're creating high expectations here. But thank you very much for the question. That's a very good question, and I think it really makes the big debate that Leonardo was opening up, and that will be at the heart of the concluding speech. But what is the respective role of private law and of public law in dealing with the big challenges of privacy protection? I'll answer by saying this. I was actually presenting the same paper I presented today at Yale Law School not many months ago. And my American colleagues, with their very pragmatic US law approach, said, forget about private law. It will be the market who solves everything. And their vision was, law will always be catching up. In fact, technological developments might, by itself, overcome many of the problems we're facing today, and of course create new problems, and then the law will be trying to catch up again, and then technological developments will always lie ahead. Now, I might be the old-fashioned European, and I think still public law has a role, or simply I am selfish. I am a public lawyer. I teach European constitutional law, so I do believe that constitutional law has a role to play here. But I also think that there has to be some greater interaction between private law and public law. Now, my view of things is that, for instance, in the question of transatlantic relation, the entire issue of dealing with privacy cannot be delegated to the private sector. Though, private corporation might have an incentive and an interest in solving the problem, and it could produce a race to the top in privacy protection. That's not necessarily the case, and that's why I think public authorities have to step in, at least in creating a sort of common regulatory environment within which then private corporations might be able to, bring in innovations and their own corporate perspective, but still we do need a set of common norms across the Atlantic on privacy, and I think only public authorities will ultimately be able to produce those norms and to enforce them.
Very interesting, and I think that this is also could be related to another kind of reflection. The fact that it's always more common that fundamental rights are enforced against private entities. I mean, it's clear if you look from the other side of the ocean, you have clearly a theory that is going against it, the state doctrine theory, as you know. But if you look at the new judicial trends in Europe, speaking about the famous cases now that we mentioned all the afternoon, it's possible, according to many scholars, is the case that there was an horizontal direct application of the provision of the charter. So in a way, it's also interesting to see how finally private entities could be in a way involved also without
wanted to be involved through the direct horizontal application of the European Bill of Rights. Please.
Yeah, I want to go in this sense. Could we imagine if what happened if Google decided to put a filter of some kind of information in Europe? So, if that happened, could we make something? I think yes. I mean, I think we can rule necessity. I mean, we can rule that Google has to respect, for example, neutrality in the content or in the information that it gives. I mean, I know that there are already filters, economic filters in Google, but if we have ideological filters, we have to do something against this private power because we have some kind of private censorship. And in the digital society, as I have said, the private powers, they are stronger than the public powers. And if I want to recognize the freedom of the people, the fundamental idea that fundamental rights are in order to protect the people, we need also to state this horizontal effect of fundamental rights. And I think we have to work in this direction. It's one of the goals that we need to follow.
Thanks a lot. Then there is the usual banal issue related to the constitutional role displaying a private entity as a part of the game, like Google, especially after Google Spain. But this I will not say because it's been even to abuse as an argument, even if it's true. Other.
Just to open another issue that I think it's really important today is what happened, what's the task of these big companies like Google, etc., all because they store thousands, millions of data available. What's the role they have before a state? Before when state needs data in order to prevent tourism or in order to prevent other global risks or health risks, for example, are they obliged to share this information? That reminds me the new case of Apple in the United States and the obligation of Apple to share certain type of information. I think this is a new element to be considered. And has a relationship with the work we are trying to study today.
I agree with you that you say that the entities, the big entities, should consider what is their role.
I think we have to think about
we have to think about it.
It's a topic that is on the table, and we have to share together what's our opinion on this reality, what happened. They have the duty to share or not, because our privacy, citizen privacy is involved. So I'm concerned about this topic.
Yes, I agree with you, but I would take it even a step forward, and I think that they do have social liability. They have to be liable for the communication and for the safety of the people who use their platforms. Google, WhatsApp, I'm sorry thinking of social networks, but for me this is what I'm thinking. They should be, even if you talk about terrorism, they are responsible for filtering. They have to be aligned with constitutional law, with international, transnational constitutional law, because of course they are international companies. And for me, using metaphors is very dangerous, but I will do that. If you go on a road and you, in the road, you believe it's safe, right? You take, I don't know, in Germany there's the PV road,
we're talking about. Anyway, there is an Israel road that when I go there, for me, I expect it to be safe, meaning no people running around that road, no burned tires around that road. That's how social networks should behave. They should be liable for safety around their platforms. It's just a matter of time, I think, and if there will be open to lawsuits as it's happening as we speak, because a lot of lawsuits are against Facebook, against WhatsApp, I think eventually they will have to be liable for that.
I don't know if I understood you correctly, but if you suggest that Google, WhatsApp, Facebook should filter what's in the platforms, where do we put the limit? So, because in a certain sense we're saying they have to respect our privacy, but on the other hand, we are saying they should monitor what we are putting or what somebody is putting in the platform. So, and without this meaning I'm trying to defend them, but we're putting them in a very difficult position. Where do they stop filtering something? And so, in a sense, we shouldn't be transferring to them the power to decide many things. One thing is if the law says you have to do this, that's one thing. But the other thing is just make them responsible for not filtering, I don't know, messages between terrorists, for organizing an attack. It is very difficult for them because there's freedom of speech, there's privacy rights. So I think if there's no clear, absolute clear regulation from the governments, if I were the lawyer for Google or for any of these ones, I would say, do not do anything. Just let them say whatever they want. Remember the issue with Facebook. Facebook does not allow pictures of nude ladies in their website. And there's a campaign now against mammal cancer that they're using the chest of a big man just to show what women should do because they're not allowed to publish the nude chest of a woman. So, and everybody's complaining about that. But at the same time we say, well, we should be careful because, I don't know, children might look at that. So the balance is really difficult there.
Quickly, of course, it's a slippery slope. I agree with you. But for my happiness, my issue is about minors. So I can say, okay, with minors, please have a certain line. Okay? It's easy for me to say I take minors until the age of 18 and I draw a line where I want to protect them, extra protection. Now, I agree with you, it should be state-oriented regulation and not leave it in their hands, but it's a dance. We should start to talk the talk and start to initiate. But you're right, MySpace was the only one, MySpace, it's a social network, it was the only one back in the beginning, like 2000, who went against an offensive speech. And then she was hit with so many lawsuits, because like you said, if you were there right, they don't do nothing. That's true. And then MySpace just evaporated eventually. And that's not.
I will add what Liat said that the end line is a story of check and balances, because all human rights, freedom of speech, and all the other rights are never absolute. We always have constraints, we always have limitation, and some of the new limitations are due to situations that we could not foresee
when we were thinking about the legal structures of defining and protecting the right. So modification, new modification, new thoughts must come into the picture, taking into account, of course, the strong protection we want to build or to keep around about certain human rights.
Can I add a short comment on
I'm the father of 6 children, and I do not belong to Opus Dei, so it's a double achievement. My concern is that sometimes families transfer their duties to somebody else. The first duty is on the parents. Of course, it's absolutely impossible to know exactly what your kids are doing 100% of the time. But it's a matter of education. It's a matter of warning them what they're doing. It's to educate them how they should use the social networks, not to publish things because they will be exposed. They have to count on that. That is a responsibility that I think many parents are avoiding. They prefer to blame somebody else, not themselves. Because sometimes it's our fault that we are not teaching our kids what are the perils of the social networks. It's very difficult.
Well, as a mother of 3 and another one on the way, I can tell you, of course, it's the duty of parents, but not all parents are legally oriented or legally aware. And plus, that's right, you cannot put all the parents. It's true. I agree that first of all, it's education. Parents, schools, etc. But it cannot be, if you talk about philosophically, legally, point of view, you cannot put it on the parents and say it's only them. Of course, it starts with them. The awareness, I say we're aware of law and of mistreatment of children is on the verges of society, and it's not in the society.
Okay, many thanks. Unfortunately, it will be very interesting to go on, but now we really want exactly in the past, I would say in the way, even of the last intervent, would be great now to hear what the 2 keynote speakers will say about that, especially I would say in relation to the intersection between public law and private law methodology and new of all tools to deal with the new environment. I mean, it's the usual question. In a way, to keep the categories or to try to propose, if not new categories, new methodologies in order to deal with a new form of challenge in legal terms. And first of all, we take the floor now, Professor Alberto Maria Capino, that I invited to the table. Is a full professor of private law and co-rector at European University of Rome. He's also my president, in the sense he's the president of the Italian Academy of Law and Code, and thanks to his invitation I am a member of it. And it's impossible to enumerate, to name all his publications. Let's say that are more than 200, and are related to issues of private law, intellectual property, information technology, competition law, and regulation in the world of atoms and the world of business. So exactly related to our topic, our, let's say, angle. So having said this, and I really thank him, Professor Billon, that will speak later, for being here despite the usual problems that trains, it was per Italia, but that's not per Italia, because it's letting imagine what would be, should be very quick from Milan, Rome, but it's not so quick as it's planned. I will immediately hand over and give him the floor. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Foreste and Joanna. All papers presented at this roundtable have the advantage of offering food for thought also to civil lawyers. This signifies the preparation of my conclusions, I mean suggestions more than conclusions. The report of Giovanna De Minico was about new challenges to fundamental rights in the age of fear. Create large databases for the prevention of crimes if the same are not sufficiently protected, may paradoxically increase the surface area of the terrorist attacks, facilitating access of a criminal organization to the names of the individuals recruited for unlawful purposes. Indeed, as the case Apple versus FBI shows, the interest of a fair balance is not related only to the public question of the protection of individual and fundamental rights, but also to the need of a commercial view of the fact that a violation of the right to privacy produces a responsibility on the holders of personal data. The complexity of the issues suggests also to consider alternative ways to that of regulatory instruments, in particular using the technical and communicative tools for information purpose that with the appropriate correction may be able to explain to the public opinion the intention of the lawmakers. Foreste Pollicino, the enforcement, as well in this report of Professor Pollicino, this one has highlighted the importance that the profile of data protection and data security is subject of specific contractual provisions between user and providers. Security is becoming one of the biggest differentiators among providers and in particular among cloud services providers. The US experience on the application of the Patriot Act has also shown how the between protecting public safety and protection of the rights and freedoms constitutionally guaranteed. The speech of Federico Fabrini shows, from my point of view, how it is important that European and American relations will be defined looking each other. In this perspective, the possibility of adopting legislative measures that are already extremely in line with the American regulatory framework, the directive NIS, Network and Information Security, as a result of the joint communication of the European Commission and the High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy for the Parliament and the Council. It represents the legislative asset at the European level. Even the report on the protection of minors on the internet show, one hand, as the role of private individuals must be taken into account in order to ensure adequate protection to the collective interest, and on the other, as this forecast should be shared on a large scale. On the first point, it is clear the importance of rules such as that relating to data protection impact assessment, recently introduced in the data protection regulation. A risk analysis procedure that aims to evaluate ex ante the impact that a given technical solution will have on the protection of data processing. With regard to large-scale sharing of rules, it's sufficient to note that the services offered on the Internet are without territorial limits and as the technical measures restricting the use depending on the territorial regions are always easily bypassed. Fully abbondante competition and net neutrality. Net neutrality is a guarantee of equal access to the Internet for all citizens through the Internet exercising constitution and protecting freedom. Anyway, it is quite clear as the issue of the net neutrality impacted on the one hand on the right of access, but also on the other on the relationship between operators and the users. In this perspective, it is preferable to define a common position on a European level, also with a view to put unequal conditions for development with the EU, avoiding an individual position, then make uneven regulation in Europe. The general issues on the Internet from German Teruel Lozano that I find particularly relevant in the private law perspective is that relating to the technical block activity in the censorship in Internet. A technical possible measure to control access to information on the Internet could be a set of system of prior authorization or license to access the network. This measure would not be imposed on user access, but on the providers of information society services, PIS, or the creation of digital media. This measure of the private censorship can come in many cases a directive encouraged by public law. For example, an excessively stringent regulation on internet content liability on ISPs can force them to have to adopt these practices, requiring them sometimes to eschew censor assessing whether a content may or may not be considered illegal, and remove them getting therefore exempt from liabilities. The report by Marco Bassini on political rights on the Internet has also highlighted the impact that the exercise of such rights on the network has in the private law perspective. Already during a hearing at the Senato Italiano on the costituzionalization of the right of access to the Internet, the Italian Academy of the Internet Code, our Italian Academy of the Internet Code, observed how the declination of this right as a negative freedom or social right has a different impact. In particular, the decision to include the right of access between social rights implies the evaluation that the network access is an essential need for the citizen as member of the community, and therefore the right to access reordered the implementation of the living conditions for all, like the right to health, the right to research and teaching, and to education. Finally, the right of privacy. Rosario Serra Cristobal. The presence of a further report on the right to privacy shows the relevance of this topic. In particular, online privacy has never been more high profile, with controversies surrounding Privacy Shield, the replacement for EU-US data sharing framework center, ARGO. The report, Internet Privacy Fears and Undermine Trust, conducted by Ipsos for the Center for International Governance Innovation, shows that 83% of those interviewed claimed to have changed their online behavior in a bid to better protect their privacy. Trust in public and private bodies to keep personal data safe and secure is also at an online and on-task low. Just 30% of respondents claimed government are doing enough on this point, while a similar number, 31%, say the same for private companies. The study shows the importance that the user attach to the contractual provisions relating to data protection and data security, and therefore the importance of a dialogue between the different disciplines remains open on this and other topics discussed today at this round table. Thank you.
Many thanks, Alberto. I think that in your words, everyone has found a piece of the ideas, and thanks for the deep, complete, and very critical work of conclusion. Now I have the difficult work to introduce my professor, Professor Massimo Vignone. He's a professor emeritus at the University of Naples, Federico II. He has held the Doctorate of Constitutional Law, has been the director of the Department of Italian Comparative Constitutional Law, has been a member of Parliament for 4 legislatures, also as the president of the Senate Committee for Constitutional Care, recently in print Il Tempo della Costituzione, and then in Decennio Incostituzionale 2015. Why we need another conclusion, I suppose, in asking? Because internet is a very complex world, private profile, public profile. We have a listen problem of fundamental rights, problem of regulation of kind of goods, private power, which is the order, and also is problem of values, which is the cornerstone of the internet. So, take the floor.
Thank you, Giovanna, and thank you, Oreste, for inviting me here tonight for some conclusive remarks in our meeting. Let me take up first the question which Oreste Pollicino, I think, asked about public law and private law. You're probably too young to know that academicians play a game of chess since about the, what was it, 1900s, about 200 years, playing with these terms, public law, private law. I'm not sure they maintain their meaning when a new world opens up. Professor Gambino already mentioned the Apple case fighting against the FBI. So we have privacy, which is defended by a private subject against the public authority which wants to encroach upon it. What is it? How we define this kind of scenario? Before that, some of you may remember what happened when there was a discussion in the United States about new legislation after the Patriot Act Microsoft Yahoo wrote to President Obama saying they did not want legislation permitting the public powers to enter into individuals' private matters. They did not want any legislation permitting dragnet, control, mass control of phones or the internet or emails or so. So we have private subjects defending what we would have said so far are fundamental public interests against public powers representing us. How does it work? We may find another most recent example which touches upon matters put forth by Marco Passini about politics. You may have heard what's been happening lately with the Five Stars movement, Greenland movement, the death of Casaleggio, and you may have read that Grillo's blog is going to be closed. And it's going to be substituted by a platform which is called the Russo. And the name tells you what it's for. It's a platform intended for democratic participation. That's the way you will define it, probably. The participation of the 120,000 or 130,000 members of the Grillo's family, political family, let's put it this way. But then, consider one thing. This is going to be the basic instrument for the exercise of fundamental political rights, as we have already seen. And who's going to decide how it works? Who's going to admit posts? Who's going to deny access? Who's going to allow access? Who's going to be the webmaster? Because it is the webmaster who decides on this. Do we have legal rules for webmasters in the case of democratic participation through internet platforms? Are they private rules? Are they commercial rules? Are they public rules? What are they? Who's accountable to whom? Who's going to decide? Who's the master of the webmaster? Is this a public law question? Is it a private law question? What is it? So I think we must understand that traditional categories are not going to fit the things we see and the things we live nowadays. And we have seen it throughout the contributions to our debate today, starting from Giovanna De Minico, which gave us an idea of how the pressure of fear through the internet is changing our general outlook or on fundamental segments of the legal system like criminal law. See, she told us that we are abandoning some basic principles we have been following for many, many years, going back to principles which we had abandoned for many years in the field of criminal law. If you have followed courses in criminal law, you have already understood this point, or you will when you will have a course of law, because the pressure of fear is not sustainable. A fear which translates itself into legislation. A fear which is, and this is the paradox, going to push the legislator out of its inertia, which Oreste Policino, I think Oreste Policino mentioned. Because you see, a legislator is not inert because the members of parliament are lazy. A legislator is inert when it does not know what to decide or how, and comes out of inertia when something pushes the decision out, because there is an interest prevailing. Now, when you hear that in France they have a legislation which is very harsh on fundamental rights, you understand that the pressure given by fear on the political system has been such that the safeguards of fundamental rights have been crushed. And that may happen in our country. It has happened in some measures in the United States. It has happened also in the United Kingdom. It may happen anywhere. Will constitutions be able to resist this? That is a question I do not know how to answer right now, because constitutions do not resist as such for what is written in them. Constitutions resist if the people who has written the constitutions resist. And that not always happens. This has not happened in the United States, although in that country there is a real worship of the Constitution, but the individual rights have been devastated after 9/11. You had people in Guantanamo for years without ever seeing a judge, and maintained there on the decision of a committee which was not a judicial subject. And they are still there. And the President Obama was not able to get them out. And the judicial system never got to decide on the point. So when I hear that we are bridging between the United States and Europe, I see something I understand really, because it's a very interesting point, the one which has been taken up, the lack of, let's say, guarantees for foreign non-nationals. Of course, they are left out because nobody cares for them, because they don't exist for the legislator, national legislator. They are nuisance. So, if you happen to be in a lucky mood, you have a consultative treaty. Otherwise, they just let them have the fate, and nobody cares. But see, the problem is, you can understand this, but what happens if you see a whole system which does not take charge of what happens to its own citizens, which has been happening which has been happening in some ways in the United States. If you go to the site of the American Civil Liberties Union, you can have an idea of what has been happening. And should we care or not about this? I think we should. Because similar things are going to happen in France. And who tells us that they're not going to happen to us tomorrow? Are you sure they won't? Now, internet in this is showing, let's say, the dark side and the bright side. Because we have been considering the web as an instrument of personal development for a long time. An instrument for fundamental rights, an instrument for personal growth. And of course, it is such an instrument. Undoubtedly, it is. But now, another side of internet is coming up. Because, as it has come out in some ways from the contributions to our debate, in some of the contributions to our debate. For instance, the recruitment for fundamentalism is made through internet. Mass control is possible because of internet. If there were no email, if there were no mobile phones, if communication did run through cables, mass control would not be possible. It is possible because of internet. Does that tell you something? So, what should the legislator do? How can we move it out of its inertia? What is the right balance between judicial activism and legislative activism? I don't know. What is the proper balance between public law and private law? I don't know. What I find very amusing, as far as I'm concerned, is that I am, as you have heard, a professor emeritus, which only means that I am older than the others, older than the colleagues that you find around here. But it also means that I, let's say, I've had my share in my own time, and now I can sit back and look at you younger colleagues and relax, and look at you who sweat and trod down unknown paths. And I think that's your future. A journey into the unknown, which is, I think, somehow frightening, but also fascinating path. Good luck, and thank you.
I suppose that Oreste and I have a special thanks to Alberto and Massimo. I repeat about our idea that assumed a special flavor once we elaborate for them. Just now I realized that we have set a great concept, thanks to the work. It has been a splendid conclusion for a splendid meeting. I hope, I'm sure that it isn't unique because within 1 year I invite Nichols. It is just the first step of ongoing work, so we go on working, and the final step should be Naples. And so I wanted to thank the organizer, Martin Bassini, and of course my colleague Oreste.